G'day and welcome to another video with Better Pics. Hope this finds you all well. Today's video I want to take you through a process of selecting, editing and exporting images that I actually shot this morning. These images will predominantly be used for stock usage, so available through my stock library. But I just wanted to take this opportunity to show you that process from start to finish. So we just jumped over to Google Maps and I just wanted to show you exactly where the images were shot this morning. So this is Burleigh Heads on the Gold Coast. If we just zoom out a little bit, you can see this is on the east coast of Australia in southeast Queensland. And it's a lovely part of the Gold Coast. It's a very small national park that's right on the ocean. So you have this wonderful opportunity to not only be in a forest, but be on the beach at basically exactly the same time. So we'll just switch over to the satellite view, and you can see that there's this beautiful sort of green space that's really close to the beach, and as you'll see by the images, it's a combination of open sky, beach images, and part of forest as well. So you can see with that first image, this was just out of the car park looking across the beach towards Burleigh Heads headland, and first image was shot at about 7:45 this morning, and then the last image was around 9:24. As you can see, up on Burleigh Heads headland, looking over the ocean towards Surfers Paradise. So it was a nice walk. I think the total distance that I walked was around 4 kilometres, and all really well graded tracks. So for anyone who would like to go and check out the same spot. As you can see, we had really sunny weather. There were no clouds in the sky, which is great for obviously photographing the ocean. It can be a little bit problematic when you're in a forest because you get that speckled sort of high contrast light, but we'll see that we'll have a few images that we can definitely work with. If we just have a bit of a look down at the breakdown of images that I captured, out of 417, 355 were landscape orientation, 62 were portrait. I tend to try and always shoot portrait images as well, but in this case there were far more landscapes. Bit of a selection of ISOs there. Obviously the lower ISOs were while I was out in the open, and the higher ISOs while I was under the forest canopy. Exposure times anywhere between 1/80th and 1/500th of a second. Aperture value was anywhere between f4 and f10, but the majority were around f8, which I know for the lens that I was using is the sharpest aperture. Focal length was a range from anywhere from 24 to 200 mil. I had a 24 to 70 with me and a 70 to 200. You can see that out of the 417, 220 was shot at 24. I really was predominantly walking around with my 24 to 70, mostly shooting wide angle as the numbers tell us. And if we have a look at the lens, you can see the 24 to 70 was used for 284 images, 70 to 200 was used for 133 of them. Everything was shot in RAW, and it was shot on a Canon R3, so which is great for when you're shooting under a rainforest canopy and you're using higher ISOs. It definitely handles those ISOs really well, and you still get really clean images, which is always a good thing. Okay, so the first stage of the process I've already completed, which is just to download the images onto a hard drive, and I put them in a folder called RAW, and that just indicates that they're the raw images that have come straight out of the camera. As you can see by the .cr3 file extension, everything has been shot under Canon RAW, which is normal for my process. I don't generally shoot RAW and JPEG because I'm always going to use the RAWs for the edit, workflow and delivery, because obviously that's always the way to, I find, to get the best results. Having said that, as you can see with my exposures, they are all very consistent. So I come from shooting a film background, and I learned very early on in the piece to get things as correct as possible within camera, just to make that final result all the more better where possible. So you can see my exposures, as you've probably noticed in previous videos, are generally on point, and I always try to get correct exposures in camera as close as possible to the final result that I'm looking for. So the first part of the process through my edits, as I mentioned earlier, for this group of images, I'm looking at just editing out options for my stock library. First part of the process is just to identify the images that are going to make it through the edit process. One of the things that you'll notice is I almost always shoot every image twice, or at least twice, sometimes 3 times. And I think that comes from the fact that over the years I've shot a lot of weddings and corporate events where I'm photographing people, and I always take 2 frames just to allow for one of those frames potentially having a person blinking. And what I find is that I've just continued that, that method of shooting where I almost always shoot a couple of frames. So you'll see that there's a lot of double ups of frames where they look very, very similar, but it's just a habit that I've gotten into over the years of working behind the camera. All right, so let's just start selecting. So normally what I do is I go through and I select all the images that I want to add into my edits, and I just do that by selecting the 5 stars, and that way I can filter the images down the track once I'm at a stage of wanting to open them up in Adobe Camera Raw for those 5-star images. So I'll just start working through all of these images and looking at them, looking at the best options, the ones that I think that will work. Obviously with stock images, it's I try to include as much as possible, or as many images as possible to have available, because the person who's potentially using the images down the track, I don't know what they're looking for. So I'm really trying to just give them as many options as possible where the framing can work within what they are looking for. So I'll just go through all of these images and just look at what framing works best. Sometimes I'll do slight differences in framing, and I'll select images based on what I think looks the best. So what I'll do is I'll just speed up this process so that you're not watching the whole process of the selection of the images, but I'm sure you've seen, based on the ones that I've selected so far, generally how I work. And what that selection process looks like. Alrighty, so that concludes the process of star rating all of the images that I think will be good for editing. As you can see up here on the filter tab, 166 images out of the 417. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I do tend to take 2 or 3 frames of fairly similar images just out of habit, really. But also, you would have noticed that I shot a few images of surfers this morning, and they tend to be a lot more images that are shot versus how many actually go through the edit process. So yeah, there would have been quite a few extras there as well. I can definitely tighten up a number of images that I shoot, but I find that I'd much rather go through options later on during the editing process and have those available to me than wishing that I'd shot more. Certainly on a day like today where we had that speckled light under the rainforest canopy, as you can see with this image. If it was softer light under the canopy, or a softer light just with weather being overcast or slightly raining, probably would have shot a lot more images. But I'm certainly happy with 166 images that are at this stage selected for editing. All right, so what I normally do then is just tick that checkbox with the star-rated images, and I select them all and right-click and open in Adobe Camera Raw. So the first part of editing is that I'll select all the images and I'll apply effects that I'll generally are going to be standard effects to all of the images, which I know are going to work. Then I go back through all of the images and I refine those edits per image based on what that particular image needs. And if there needs to be any extra work done, then that's no problem at all. But rather than having to apply the same adjustments to each image individually, I select them all and do a bit of a batch edit. And I find that really helps the process. So you can see I've made just some general edits there. With the light and color and a few other tabs as well. And then the process is just coming back through and editing each image in a way that makes me happy with how each individual image looks. And just going through that process of getting the images ready. Often what I'll do as well is I'll come back to images maybe a couple of days later and just have a look at them again and make sure that I'm happy with how they're looking. And certainly from a colour perspective, sometimes it's good to, I guess, for want of better words, calibrate your eyes and make sure that you're happy with all of the colour based on the how the image is looking. All right, so we're going to speed up this process once again, and we're going to go through all of those edits and just give them an initial edit that I'm happy with, and then we'll head over to the exporting process. Whenever I'm creating just general images that I guess demonstrate a place, I always try to get as much signage in as possible. And I just find that that's actually a type of image over the years that I've found to be really popular as well. Whether I'm shooting specifically for clients or if it's stock images, I always find that signage sells. Particularly when they're images that are demonstrating a place. So whenever you see signage, always include it. You never know where the interest may lie. So this national park has some really well-established trails, as I'm sure you can see. And I always try to show a little bit of both, so a little bit of the national park untouched, but also the established trails as well, because I tend to find that for images that demonstrate a place, that's part of the place, for want of better words. Never forget the details as well. Always really good to include detail shots. Probably could have shot a few more on this shoot, but that's okay. Generally what I try to do is always return to a specific location, particularly in a situation like this where the blue skies and clear weather that we had worked really well for outside, but it made the under the forest canopy images a little bit harder to expose correctly because of that contrasted light. So what I would aim to do is to return to this area when it's overcast and shoot some images under the forest canopy with a little bit softer light, just so that we don't get that high contrast and sometimes blown out areas. I'm actually going to remove this image from the catalogue because it's a little bit blurry. Whenever there's multiple images that were photographed with a little bit different zoom or photographed horizontally and vertically, I'll select all those images and just make the same changes to all of them at the same time. And if I need to, obviously refine as well. And that just helps to speed up the workflow. There we go. It's looking good, looking good. Yeah, that looks good. Happy with all of those. I really was for this shoot cycling through my settings quite a lot, because obviously coming from a situation like this where we have 1/25 5.6 at ISO 2000 straight out into full sunshine where we have 1/200 f8 ISO 50, it's quite different, obviously. So it just meant that cycling through settings was happening fairly quickly. But thankfully, having shot a lot of weddings, something that I'm very much accustomed to doing, moving from really dark churches into really bright areas outside in a very, very short period of time. From a stock perspective, and I guess a documentary perspective, whenever I'm photographing lookouts, I also try to photograph the lookout itself, so the view of what the lookout looks like. And I find that this is a really popular option. Particularly for tourism images where you kind of want to demonstrate for people what it looks like to be there. And of course, adding in some people just helps to give a better understanding and better context of what that place looks like. And then, of course, photographing the view without people and without images of the lookout itself. So here's a bunch of images that I shot. So I'm just going to do a large selection of all those images. There might have been some slight changes in settings along the way, so I'm just going to go through and just check them all. Of course, shooting between the two lenses as well, you will see color shifts and contrast shifts between the two lenses. One of them was a Canon lens, which was the 24-70. One of them was a Sigma lens. And the Sigma lenses tend to be a little bit cooler in their color temperature. And the Canon lenses tend to be a little bit warmer. So you will see some slight changes. So always good, even if you're shooting with the same exposure, to just double check, make sure everything's okay. And of course, if you're shooting and zooming in on specific section, which I am here, you may just need to edit the images so that they look a little bit differently and a little bit more appropriate to what the image is actually of. Now, as you've probably noticed, I do a lot of straightening of horizons. I am notoriously bad at shooting straight images. In fact, that image is blurred, so we're going to get rid of that one. Let's have a look at the next one. Yep, that one needs straightening as well. So don't ever feel bad if your images are crooked, because mine almost always are. What I'll also do is, usually because I'm hanging around a lookout for a little while, is then photograph the lookout without any people, as I did on the earlier one. And that way there's, again, more options available for whoever might be looking to use the image. Again, photograph signs. I just find that over the years, there has been quite a bit of interest in them. It can actually be really helpful as well if you need to remember the names of places, if you just photograph those signs, or any relevant information that you might need in your caption or keywords. I will be the first to admit that this light was far from ideal, but when I woke up this morning I thought, let's just go for a bit of a walk around Burleigh Heads, see what images we can capture. Well, far from ideal. All is not lost. That's why I've always been a big advocate that if conditions are less than ideal, go out and shoot anyway. It's one of the best things I was ever taught when shooting weddings, because often when you're shooting for clients, you don't get the choice of perfect weather and perfect conditions when you're working. So if you have the opportunity to go out and shoot and refine your ability to deal with poor lighting and make the best use of that situation, then absolutely do it. Because there'll be a time where you're photographing your own projects or you're visiting another country or you're on holidays and you may not be in a position of being able to access a place at the optimum time to be able to photograph it. So take advantage and do the best you can. Sometimes the images that you capture will be pure documentation of an area or a place and not the capture of an award-winning image. So you can see I'm just going through and just refining my edits for exposure or brightness and color temperature. Any one of these edits as they are would more than likely be fine. But I'm just making sure that they are at a stage that I'm happy with before I'm going to export. For some reason I have a bit of a blur on the right hand side of the lens there. Not sure what that's from. You can see with these images, these two images that I'm about to edit, that I've included one with the footpath, one without, so that you get a full view of what it looks like naturally, as well as with the footpath there as well. So construction site that was nearby looked quite interesting, so I took a few frames of it just to have it as an option. Excellent. All right, so at the very end, what I'll do, because I've unselected some images that weren't up to standard, so a couple of blurry images in there, what I'll do is hit done, because then it will apply all the metadata and changes to those images, and the ones that we've unchecked, the 5 stars, so that there's no star rating, once the images are updated, they will be removed from that filter, so they won't be included. This just means that we can reopen all the approved images back into Camera Raw and save them out as JPEGs so that they're then available for upload to the stock library. So you can see all those changes being applied to the raw images and all of those updating. In fact, that's all updated now. So you can see now we have 164 images. So there were 3 images that we removed, and they're all ready to go to be saved out as JPEGs. I'm pretty happy with how they're all looking. Generally, what I'll do is I'll come back and relook at the images, just maybe take a break from the screen, just check that I'm happy with everything around color balance and editing. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I try to get my exposure as correct as possible in camera, and I'm pretty happy with everything. So, I mean, obviously the light was really, really beautiful and really solid today, and all the images I'm pretty happy with, so just these initial edits. But for the purpose of demonstration for today's video, I'll just approve all of these images and we'll go through the process of exporting them out as JPEGs, and then we can look at the process of captioning and keywording and getting them ready for all the descriptions to be put into the images. Then when people are searching for images within the stock library, they can search by keyword and have a look at the caption and description so that they understand exactly the context of the image, where it was shot, and what the material is that's included in the image. This, of course, is just a normal part of the process whenever you're producing stock images or stock video with captions, keywords, tags, and information about where the image was shot, what it's shot of, and so forth. Before I do that though, I do select all of the images when they're still raw files, and I batch rename the images that with information that is relevant to the images. Alrighty, so for these images, because they are of burly heads, and I photographed them on the 13th of May 2024, which was today, that's what I'm going to do. So call the burly heads 13 May 2024 underscore, and then the sequential number will start at 1. And because there's 164 images, I'm going to have 3 digits. So you can see how I've created that with the new file name there. If we have a look down the bottom here, it gives you a preview, the current file name, and then the new file name, which will be burlyheads 13 May 2024 underscore 001. And then, of course, each image will, with that sequential number, go all the way up to 164. So let's hit rename and see that happen. Excellent, so that's all done, and you can see they are all now successfully renamed. The good thing about doing that to your raw files, obviously making sure that your rating selection is ticked, so you're only renaming the selected files, is that with stock libraries, I tend to upload in JPEG, but if someone comes back and says, oh, we'd actually like an 8-bit or a 16-bit TIFF, it means that I can go back to that raw file and find the raw file really easy, because I know it's of burly heads photographed on the 13th of May 2024. So it doesn't mean that I have to try and match up or figure out exactly which image it is, especially when there's a situation like this where you have multiple images that look fairly similar. But obviously, if a person or a client has selected a specific image, you want to be able to quickly and easily find that image and deliver it to them. So for the same reason, I'll also do all of my captioning and keywording to all of the images while they're raw files as well. So that means that if, again, a client wants it as a TIFF or some other change to that image or the image in a specific size, then all of that information is already embedded in the file, and I don't need to worry about going back and re-embedding that information. So I have a template. If we just go up to Tools, Replace Metadata, and that middle option there, it will go through the process of applying that metadata to all of the images with a few options left open so that I can fill it in specific to those images. All right then, if we just expand this tab up here, looking at metadata, you can see that under the IPTC core, my name and all of my contact details has automatically been put into the appropriate areas. And you can see I have, as part of that template, an asterisk against the other areas that I need to put that information in. So in the description, there's an asterisk, keywords, sublocation, city, state, and country. And that way it just prompts me to know exactly which sections I need to put the appropriate information in for the sake of describing all of these images. This is a really quick and easy way to speed up your workflow and prompt you on what needs to be done in specific areas of the IPTC or the metadata that's embedded in each of the files. For demonstration purposes today, we're going to save out these images, and you'll see exactly what settings I use to save them out. Basically, they're just a full resolution JPEG with as little compression as possible. So if we right click and open back up into Camera Raw, you'll see all the images are there. And if we select them all and click Save, we're going to select a subfolder, Burly Heads, and what I'm going to do is create a new folder that simply says high res. Select. We've got JPEG, all metadata, quality is 12, which is maximum. And we're going to resize to 6000, which is actually the native resolution of this image. For the R3 with Canon, it's 24 megapixels, so 6000 by 4000. You remember I straightened the horizon on a few images, so that would have slightly reduced the files. So what we're going to do is resize all of them up to 6000 pixels on the long side so that they're a standard size when they get uploaded. And even though the size of some of them was slightly reduced, it won't have a detrimental or negative effect on the quality of the file in the end. So let's hit save and we'll have those images ready to go. All right, so that's all done and completed. All of those images are saved out. And if we just hit done down on the bottom right-hand corner there, we can come up to Burly Heads in high-res stock. And you can see all of those images are saved out as JPEGs and ready for upload. And if we just open up that image a little bit, so on average for these files, they're around 10 to 15, I would say 16 megabytes. So plenty of data and information there to make use of. So this has been a sample of start to finish. So all of the images that I shot this morning while I had a bit of a walk around Burly Heads. With the weather being so beautiful, there was plenty of opportunity to capture some great images, and I'm pretty happy with the results. Even though I wouldn't say that there are spectacular images in there, there's certainly images that well represent the place and what it was like this morning, and certainly what it would be like to visit. Hope you found this video helpful, and as always, any questions are welcome in the comments below. Thanks again for stopping by, and look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.